Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Divorce Support Club with me, Claire Black, and Lev Boreiko from Ian Walker Family Law. I'll let Lev just introduce himself very quickly, and then I'll get cracking on today's topic of communicating effectively.
Hello, so yes, my name's Lev Boreiko. I'm part of the Divorce and Relationships team at Ian Walker, where we specialise in all areas of family law, ranging from divorce, child disputes, any injunctive proceedings, and any disputes between cohabitees. So yes, happy to be here with Claire Black on this video and seminar.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start sharing my screen straight away and do some little introductions that way as well. There we go. Okay, let's put us in the corner. So thank you everybody for attending. I'm Claire Black, as I said before. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I'm a master NLP practitioner, and I used to be a lawyer in a former life. I have two teenage sons. I'm divorced twice actually, and I'm also the author of Breakup from Crisis to Confidence, which was published a couple of years ago. And I'll try and show you a picture of it if the slide will move. There we go. We'll go too far. There we are. But yeah, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. What is going on here? I must have pressed a button by mistake. Okay. So, and if anybody wants a copy of that, either get in touch with me, so you can get it from my website, or you can get it from Amazon. So, what are the aims of the Divorce Support Club? Well, we are here to provide you with a holistic support so that you can concentrate on you, flipping your focus from your ex and onto yourself, so that you can become calm, you can get clarity around perhaps the things that are worrying you. You can focus on those things that you can control rather than focusing on those that you can't and getting frustrated. Help you see options and choices, communicate more effectively, and also eventually to create a new, exciting and vibrant future that you're excited about. And today we're going to talk about strategies for constructive communication. This is one of the most challenging aspects for many of my clients, because the person you used to share everything with is suddenly in a very different role, and you can find yourself in a cycle of conflict, recriminations, you never type conversations that circle around and around and around and go nowhere. And it's really easy to get into a fight or an argument about who's right and who's wrong, because probably you both think that you're right. So emotions will potentially be running very high. There's lots of fear, lots of uncertainty perhaps, and I know this can lead to really increased stress and moving into that fight, flight, freeze response when there's a perceived threat. So your conversations, you might find, can turn into fights. Oh, can turn into fights very easily. Keep touching things. There we go. By accident with my piece of paper. There we are. Yeah, so things might turn into fights very quickly, or perhaps you receive emails that feel threatening and unfair and that put you into a strong emotional state. Now, unfortunately, divorce often brings out the worst in people, and it can be really easy to fall into that very high conflict scenario. So what I'm going to do today is talk about lots of strategies that can help you to take a step back, to stay in control of your reactions, to manage your emotions, and to respond rather than react. The first fundamental thing, and we've talked about this a lot in our DSC meetings, it's really easy to get totally sidetracked by trying to control the other person, or alternatively wishing they were different, or that they would change their mind, or that they would behave differently or listen better. And this is a big mistake, putting all your focus onto them, because, and especially if they've always been difficult and they aren't going to change now that you're separated, this will be really frustrating. This person now knows how to press your buttons and probably will press them if they're particularly challenging. And if your focus is all on them and trying to get them to be different, trying to get them to understand your perspective, trying to get them to change their mind, it will sap your energy and it will take it somewhere where there's no real positive byproduct. So shifting your focus into this blue zone of the things that you can control and what you can do is fundamental to everything. So a really good question to always ask yourself is, what can I control here? And remember, you're free, of course, to put across your own perspective. You're free to state your position, But what you need to remember is that your ex then has a choice about how they respond. And remembering that can make a really big difference to your communication. You're only responsible for your part. They're responsible for theirs. Once I understood this, particularly my first divorce, I found I was much less disappointed when things didn't go the way that I wanted. Instead, I could come back into that blue zone and think, okay, what could I control here? What could I try and do differently? How could I change my words and my actions to see if I get a different result? Because after all, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And if that isn't working, you need to try and do something else. Now, doing this will free you from the frustration of trying to make your ex do anything, and also the disappointment when they just don't. Now, one of the biggest things that I find is the biggest barrier to communication when you're going through a separation is emotions. When we get caught up in our emotions, sometimes we can't see beyond them. And I like to compare emotions to visitors. So there are visitors, they're knocking on your door, and there's a scene in one of the Lord of the Rings movies where all the dwarves are knocking on the door, knocking on the door, knocking on the door, and eventually they burst in. And your emotions are just like that. They knock on the door, they're trying to give us a message, they're trying to tell us something. And if we don't open that door, we try and squash them down, they will often burst through exactly at the moment when we don't want them to. So for example, anger might be telling us that we feel perhaps humiliated. It might be telling us we feel rejected or trapped or threatened or insecure. Sadness might be telling us that we need to stop for a while and perhaps allow ourselves to grieve a little. And little moments of pleasure where we feel happy or peaceful or optimistic are telling us that there is still life out there, that there's still pleasure to be had. So as I say, emotions are probably the biggest barrier to effective communication, because when our emotions rise, we respond instinctively. We go into fight, flight, freeze, or flop. And our logical brains go offline, and our emotional brains take over and do what they think they need to do to keep us safe, which might be to fight back, might be to run away, it might be to appease the other person, or it might be to just try and brush the issue under the carpet and ignore it altogether. So the first step is definitely to become more aware of what you're feeling. So when you can name the feelings and be aware of them and acknowledge them, that will really help. One of my clients came up with this lovely little mantra: aware, accept, articulate, advance. So the first step is to be aware of what you're feeling, notice what you're feeling, accept that you're feeling it, articulate and name it, and now you can start to move beyond it. And some strategies now to start to move beyond those feelings. So for example, you could write your feelings down, give them a score out of 10 on any given day, and then keep a record and notice how it changes over time, because your emotions are always transitory. They change, they come, they go. They're a bit like the sea. The waves come in, the waves go out again. And keeping that score out of 10, you can start to notice whether your emotions are diminishing in power, whether they're getting stronger, whether there's one particular one that keeps coming up, and then you can do something about it. You could also notice where you feel it. So perhaps you feel your emotions in your chest, or you feel them in your belly. And you can then soothe that part of your body, just gentle circles, rubbing it, soothing it. You can also take it out and change it. I love doing this for clients. So if you feel that emotion in your, let's say you feel a pit in the bottom of your tummy, take that pit out and put it in your hands in front of you. This is your imagination at work. Imagine you're holding that pit in front of you and think, what could I do to change this? Could I make it smaller? Can I change its color? Can I change its shape? Can I make it go in a different direction? Can I change its texture? Perhaps it's making a noise. Perhaps I can make it quieter. Perhaps you want to make it louder. I don't know. It depends what it is. So you can take it out, change it, and then you can put it back in if you want to. If you don't want to put it back in, you can throw it away. Other things that can help you with your feelings, let them out. I was talking to a client this morning who was saying that she feels really angry and she tries to squash it down. She tries to keep it in, but actually that just builds it up. So some options: you might want to draw it. You might want to scribble on a big piece of paper, get your anger out. You might want to scream into a pillow. You might want to stamp around the garden or jump up and down or have a good cry. Sometimes having a really good cry is a good release. You might want to dance around the kitchen. You might want to stand up and just shake your whole body off. Whatever it is, let that feeling out and let it out in a safe way. And then you can start perhaps to change your feelings. So dress for how you want to feel. So if you get up in the morning and you're feeling really low, don't put on your mankiest, oldest, dirtiest tracksuit. Put on something that actually makes you feel better, perhaps something in a bright colour or something that makes you feel confident, and dress for how you want to feel. You could wear makeup, you stay off social media, because that's one of the things that can take you into some of those dark places. So stay off social media. What you don't know can't hurt you. And perhaps shake up your routine. So perhaps if you always go to the supermarket on a Saturday morning, you go to the same supermarket every week, and it reminds you of when you were married and it makes you feel sad, go somewhere else, go on a different day, shop in a different place, shake up your routine, take control and do some things differently. And that will help you to feel differently. One of my favourite strategies for dealing with emotions is also riding the wave. So what you need to do is just sit somewhere quietly, breathe in and out a few times. And then when you feel a wave of emotion coming towards you, imagine that you are like a surfer. You're on your surfboard, you're paddling out, and you're not going to try and avoid this wave. You're going to meet it. You're going to turn your board. Imagine yourself turning your board and riding that wave of emotion to the shore. Because the beautiful thing about emotions is they do come and they do go. So they rise and they fall. So you can ride that wave of the emotion into the shore, and you'll always, always land on the beach. Once you've landed on the beach, you can put your board to one side, you can sit, you can imagine yourself in the sunshine, you can imagine the warmth on your back, you have a lovely towel there ready and waiting, and then you can sit and you can breathe and imagine yourself sitting on that warm beach. That emotion has passed. And then you can start bringing your logical brain back on and thinking, what can I do next? So once you've now got your emotions under control, you've perhaps used some of those strategies to dial them down, you can start to set your intentions. You'll have the bandwidth now to look at the bigger picture and the long-term goals. So know how you want to be. How do you want to behave? Do you want to go through this separation and divorce with feeling calm, with dignity, with confidence? Know how you want to do it and set your intention every day and in front of every meeting and before every time that you have to speak to your ex, even reply to your ex on email. Know how you want to be. And some really useful questions you can ask yourself. So, what do you want your relationship to look like in 1 year? What do you want it to look like in 5 years? And what do you want it to look like at your child's wedding? These are really important questions to ask, because what you do now will affect what your relationship looks like in 1 year or 5 years or at your child's wedding. Now, everybody's answers to this will be different. So some of you might say, well, I just want a clean break as quickly as possible. I never want to have contact with this person again, especially if there are no children. And that's fine. If that's your goal, then keep that in the front of your mind. When I was getting divorced the first time, it was really important to me that when my children get married, we can sit at the same table if that's what they want. So I kept that right at the fore of my mind every time I went into any conversation with my ex-husband and any meeting with him at all. Because ultimately, the question is, how do you want to feel when you look back about what you say and do now? So in 5 years' time, how do you want to feel about what you say and do now? It was really important to me that I felt proud, that I felt that I had done all I could, and that I had behaved in a way that I saw as dignified. And perhaps yours is different, but ask yourself that question and have a think about it, maybe do some journaling around it. If possible, communicate that to your ex-partner as well. I did that. I explained to my ex that when our children get married, I want us to be able to sit at the same table, and we could agree that that was a common goal that we had. So have a think about that and think about where you want to be. Then start noticing your intentions. So you could set an intention to keep that vision of where you want your relationship to get to in the forefront of your mind. And it's also really important to be honest about your intentions, because sometimes our intentions can keep us stuck. Sometimes they're helpful, but sometimes they keep us stuck in a place that's not comfortable for us, perhaps a place of conflict. And these intentions will really set the tone and the feeling behind everything that we say and do. So, for example, is your intention to punish your ex? Is your intention perhaps to hurt them the way that they might have hurt you? Is your intention to communicate just how angry you are with them? Or is your intention perhaps to try and win them back? And those intentions are all examples of ones that will probably keep you stuck where you are rather than helping you move forward. So then ask, is that intention really, really helping me right now? Is it serving me? And if not, what intention would it be better to set? And then on the other side, where might you be making assumptions about your ex's intentions? So where might you be assuming that they're doing something to hurt you or to punish you or to make your life more difficult? I've heard clients lots and lots of times talk about how their ex-partner has done something to punish them, or perhaps to control an aspect of the divorce, or perhaps to wind them up. And they might be right to a degree, but that's probably not the only intention that they have. So I find it really useful to start to challenge my assumptions about my ex's intentions. These are some really good questions to ask. For example, do you assume that you know why your ex is behaving in a certain way? Are you 100% sure that you're right? Now, even if you're only 99% sure that you're right, that still leaves a little bit of 1% that could be something else. So what else could their intention be? So I remember working with a client whose ex was being particularly difficult. He wasn't engaging in the process of going through their divorce. And she assumed that his intention was to communicate to her that she was worthless. Now, when we talked about this, and I said, are you 100% sure that's right? She said, well, no. What else could it be? Well, maybe he's burying his head in the sand. Maybe he's afraid actually of what the financial settlement might look like. And once you start to loosen your assumptions, it really helps to open up your communication and helps you to start thinking about what feelings might be behind their words and actions. Just thought I'd throw out some really useful mantras that I found really useful when I was getting divorced, and that my clients find really useful as well. So if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. So if what you're doing isn't working, try anything else. So have a think about, are you doing the same thing you did last time? What was the result you got last time? And did it work for you? If not, what could you change? Are there any patterns in your communication? And if so, what could you do differently to see if you can shift that pattern? Secondly, it's not what happens to you that makes the difference. It's what you do with what happens to you. And I use this one to help me remember to think about what I can control, what I can do. This helped me remember that I didn't, for example, want my divorce to define me. It made me think about what I could do to make sure that it didn't. And it stopped me getting stuck in that kind of place where I felt like I was the victim of what was happening to me. And then choice is better than no choice. This is brilliant. When you have choices, and I try and encourage you to find at least 3, then you really have a conscious decision to go one road or another. If you've only got one option, you're stuck. If you've got 2 options, then you have a dilemma, not much better. If you've got 3 options, then you have an absolute choice to make between them. And even if 2 of the options are total rubbish and you really don't like them, choosing that 3rd one is a much more empowered choice than feeling like it's your only option. And then lastly, the person who's most flexible has the most influence. This is really interesting. So when you do something different, or you're flexible about your behavior and you try different things, you'll get a different response every time. So if you're able to be flexible, then you might be able to think of different ways to approach things, different ways of saying things, rather than staying stuck in the same patterns, which might be a pattern of conflict. So start to think about how you could be flexible. Almost imagine yourself putting a flexible hat on and thinking, what could I do differently here? We've talked about all of these before, but just some very quick reminders. General things to remember to do when you feel those emotions rising. Stop, breathe, think, respond. One of my favourite mantras, kept me out of trouble a lot of times when I was getting divorced. The stop is important. The breathing is important to get oxygen to your brain. That enables you to think, and then you can respond more carefully. Sleep on it. I'm a big fan of this. Your brain will process all the information that it's taken in during the day while you're asleep. Miraculously, sometimes in the morning, you will feel differently about something, or you'll have an answer for a question that you've been asking because your brain has been able to process in your subconscious. This is why I have the 24-hour rule of not responding to anything unless I absolutely have to, without waiting for 24 hours first. I can sleep on it, I can calm down, I can maybe bash out a really angry email if I choose to, but then I can leave it and not send it. So keep that, use that time. You can also take advice in that time if you need to. Focus on what you can control. Back to that diagram that we talked about earlier. Try and find your 3 options so that you've got choice. And remember that you can choose when and how and whether you respond to any communication from your ex-partner. I like to call this discretionary engagement. So you're in charge of choosing when and how and whether you respond. And lastly, be really clear on your boundaries. So communicate them. So for example, if your ex-partner sends you lots of emails during the day when you're at work, you could send one email which says, I'm not going to respond to lots of emails while I'm at work. I will look at them all between 5 and 6 on a Wednesday and reply to you then. For example, it's very clear that you're setting out exactly what you are going to do. And we've talked about boundaries lots of times, but put those in place and then stick to them. A couple of little tips for when you are communicating directly, perhaps face to face. Try and always speak from the I. So I feel, I would like, I will, I can commit to, because you're owning it then. As soon as you start saying things like you never, you always, you should, you're likely to get a defensive reaction because you are telling the other person what to do. Whereas if you say, I feel angry, no one can really argue with that because all you're doing is stating how I feel. Have an exit line ready and rehearsed. Practice what you want to say so that when you have to say it, it comes easily to you. Imagine that you're rehearsing for a play or something. So have an exit line if you need to leave the conversation. Be prepared, know exactly what points you want to make, and again, practice them beforehand so that you know exactly what you want to say and you're really clear. And then listen, rather than thinking about how you'll answer the question. This is a really hard thing to do, but really worth practicing. Active listening means you're listening to the other person to try and understand their perspective, rather than hearing their first 3 words and then thinking about your response. So really take a step back and see if you can listen rather than thinking about how you'll answer, because you probably learn a lot about your ex-partner's worries, concerns, fears, or simply how they're thinking. And you can then use that to communicate more effectively with them. And then lastly, body language. So this statistic, when I first read it, really, really surprised me. When we communicate, 7% of what we communicate is in our words. Only 7%. 38% is in the tone of voice that we use, and 55% is in our body language. Now, this is why messaging over WhatsApp or text often goes wrong, because you've only got the 7% of the words then. You can't hear the tone, you can't see the body language. So when you're communicating face to face, be really aware of your body language. And we've all had those situations, I'm sure, where, perhaps your child says, oh, I'm really sorry. And you think, no, you're not. I can hear by the tone of your voice that you're not sorry. And your body language is telling you that you're not sorry, even if your word is saying that you are. So just be really careful with your body language. Try and avoid things like rolling your eyes. Make it your mission to hold your head high, put your shoulders back, make your body language match your words and your tone. And that will also affect how you feel, which will actually help you to feel more confident anyway. So think about how a confident person might stand. Think about how a confident person might sound, and think about the words that they might say, and use that when you're planning your exit lines and what you want to say. And then lastly, just a very quick run through of perhaps some self-boundaries around written communication. So this is an example of boundaries that a client of mine actually came up with last year. So he decided that every time he had to write an email to his ex-partner, he would be clear, he'd be polite, he would be businesslike, factual, assertive, unemotional, to the point, and really careful with his language. Now, he then stuck that up next to his computer, and every time he had to write an email, he checked off that he had done all of those things. And that meant that he felt that he was in control of his part of the communication. He was controlling his reactions, and he was responding in the best way that he possibly could. So I'm going to stop sharing. It's a very, very quick run through of lots of communication strategies. Hopefully, watching through, you will pick out maybe 2 or even 3 of those that you can use and start to use going forward. So I'll ask Lev if you've got any comments or anything that you want to add to any of those, or any suggestions of yours too that you want to throw into the ring.
I think you covered quite a lot of points, actually. I think what I tend to see, and I think from the more lawyer perspective, is that I think for a lot of people, they don't go into a divorce wanting an acrimonious breakdown. Most people want an amicable divorce. However, that can somehow tumbleweed sometimes out of control because of kind of the communication side of things, or ineffective or very ambiguous communication. So I think from a lawyer's point of view, it's trying to be precise and taking the emotional side of things out of communication. I think the one question I had for you, Claire, is, to a certain degree, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, is how do you know that your response is emotionally charged?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I would start to look at the language in it, for example. So I mean, the 24-hour rule here is really useful. So I would suggest you, if we're talking about email correspondence, for example, write out your initial response and then leave it. Leave it 24 hours, sleep on it, and then come back to it. And then look at the language that you're using. Look at the words that you're using. Just trying to think of an example. So, if you're using words like attack, why do you have to attack me? Let's have a look at that, just that sentence, for example. First of all, it's starting with a why, and that's always accusatory. So I would try and remove sentences that start with why do you always blah, 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 initially. Then attack is a very emotive word in itself. So look for emotive words in your message and think of a different way. So you could say something like, when you said X, I felt very defensive because I felt that you were attacking me. That's a very different way to say the same thing. So I think it's about looking at the language that you're using, putting yourself. The other thing you can do is kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes. So you can almost do this by moving chair. So if you're reading them, say on your phone, for example, you're reading an email, read the email as you and think, okay, how do I react to that? What do I think that's saying? What do I believe about it? Stand up, shake your body off, sit in a different chair, and then pretend to be your ex-partner. You've got their values, you've got their beliefs, you've got their background, you've got their fears, and then read it through with that perspective, and you may get a different view on what they've said. You may start to notice some of the assumptions perhaps that you've been making about how they feel. That I find that a really good strategy. And then the third thing you can do is go into another chair and look at it as an independent third party. If I was an independent third party reading this email, what would I think? What advice would I give? How would I feel? And that enables you then to kind of take a step back from being very caught up in the emotion of that moment. So I'll often ask clients, for example, if you were a fly on the wall, or you were an independent, supportive person floating above this in a helicopter, what would you see? That can be a really interesting question to ask to help you to take a step back. And you can do that with their email coming in, but also with your response going back out as well. Read it from their eyes.
I think that's very sound advice. Absolutely, and I think it's something that we do as practitioners always, because I think once you understand that the same point of view can be seen in 2 or 3 different varieties or variations, it is just trying to close some middle ground usually.
Exactly, and when you think about us all as individuals, we all have in NLP, we call it maps of the world. So my map of the world and how the world works and how we communicate and how I see you is very different to your map of the world, because you have different beliefs, you had a different childhood, you might be hungry, you might be tired, all of those things can affect how we view something. So just remembering that your map of the world is not the same as your ex-partner's is often helpful. I often like to think of it as I'm an island, they're an island, and sometimes our islands kind of float closer together and sometimes they float apart, and sometimes we send little missiles in from one to the other. Just viewing it like that can help you to take a step back. So you might ask yourself, am I sending in a missile right now? And do I really want to do that?
Absolutely. I think the only other kind of observations that I made, I think, as you were talking, and I think again it's something that a lot of people struggle with, is to remember the bigger picture. I think when you are, whether you're in proceedings or not, there are always little side issues that can result in communications going in one direction or another. So do you have any helpful tips in relation to how an individual can always, or as much as possible, have a sight over the bigger picture? I mean, do you use sticky notes or?
Yeah, so the thing that the stuff I talked about in terms of keeping that vision of where you want to get to in the front of your mind is really helpful. Quite often with clients, I'll get a big piece of A3 paper and we will make a brainstorm or an image, or however they prefer to work, of where they want to get to. So we will write down the words that they want how they want their relationship to look. And that might be different as a relationship between the two of you as individuals to your relationship as parents as well. You might have two separate visions. And then quite often I'll say to my clients, right, stick that up. You need to put that on your bathroom mirror, put it on your fridge, have post-it notes up around your house with the important words on it, so that they are there. They sink into your subconscious then when you see them, rather than something happening and then you having to dredge in the back of your mind, where did I want to get to? I can't quite remember. So yeah, I'm a big fan of post-it notes, sticky notes, mantras written up on the wall. I know that a lot of them are quite cliched, but they're cliched for a reason, aren't they? Because they work. So yeah, I'm a big fan of post-it notes. I'm also a big fan of things like, if you don't want to put a post-it note up with these words on, perhaps you're still living in the same house, or perhaps you don't want your children to see some of these things. You could have little circle stickers, for example, like a yellow circle that that means I want to be dignified. Or you might have a blue circle that denotes I know that I need to have a strategy that helps me to feel calm, and stick those up around your house or in your wallet, so that you've got an association, and call it an anchor, to feeling calm or feeling confident or feeling dignified with that little sticker. And that's a way to do it without anybody else knowing that that's what you're actually doing. So yeah, that's my top tip for that one. I'm a big fan of post-it notes. I had a client actually recently who did a brilliant thing with her children, and she was worried about how the separation was affecting them. So every morning before school, they were quite young, I think 6 and 8, something like that. Every morning before school, they talked about how they wanted to intend to be today. So they would say, well, I want to be happy today, or I want to be positive, or I want to be confident, or I want to be quiet, or I want to be calm, or I want to be peaceful, whatever it might be. And then they'd write their word on a post-it note and they stick it on the wall. And after a few weeks, she had this wall full of these brilliant words that she could go to anytime they wanted to. They got to the stage where they would go to the wall and she'd say, which of these words would you like to be today? Because they've got them all up there. I had another client who bought one of those, those Christmas tree things that you get at Christmas that have got little tiny lights on. They look like branches. Yep. Yeah. Yep. She got one of those, and she got a load of luggage labels, and she wrote her favourite mantras, sayings, reminders, etc. on luggage labels and hung them on her tree. And then every morning she went to her tree and asked herself which of these would be most helpful today, and picked it out. And I think she still has it. and we're talking 2 years down the line now, but it's now changed into something much more positive. So there are all sorts of things you can do, but the more you can see it and the more you can read it on a regular basis, the more it will sink into your mind.
Yes, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Again, and I think it might be helpful to viewers, again, from more the legal perspective. As obviously as you viewers might be aware, obviously we're coming out of lockdown, and during lockdown, a lot of court hearings have been taking place through virtual means, whether that's telephone or video. The court is currently making a shift to more in-person hearings, and I think to a certain degree, this links into the idea of communication, body language, tone of voice. So obviously, is there any helpful tips that you can provide in terms of body language if someone is placed in a stressful scenario such as going to court?
Yeah, so one of the best things that you can do is almost run through the day in your imagination. So what you need to do is work out in advance what you're going to wear, for starters. So when you get up in the morning, you've got it all ready, and you know what it is you're going to put on. Wear something that's going to help you to stand tall and feel the way you want to feel. So if you want to go in feeling confident, wear something that makes you feel that. And then what you do is, if you sit somewhere really comfy, and if you need to close your eyes, but imagine that you are going through the day. Okay, so you see yourself in your mind getting up, getting dressed, having breakfast, going to the court. You've got everything that you need in your bag, all the post-it notes you need, all the pens you need, the water you need, everything. You're all sorted. You go in and you kind of watch yourself as though it's a movie. You watch yourself going through the day, performing really well, behaving as you want to, standing tall, coming out with exactly the things that you want to say, holding your body the way you want to, and you watch it right the way through to the end until you've left and you can go home and you know that you've done it successfully. And run through that again and again and again in your mind, every time making it bigger, brighter, and perhaps louder, clearer. You can almost imagine yourself the first time you're sitting at the back of a cinema watching. Move 3 rows forward the next time and watch it a bit more closely. Move to the front the next time, watch it even bigger, and then finally step into it. So imagine yourself stepping into the scene and you almost feel it in your body. And I use this a lot with clients. I call it mental rehearsal. I like to call it being the Steven Spielberg of your own mind, because your brain is really clever. Your imagination and your memory fire the same circuits. So if you can imagine yourself performing exactly as you want to, behaving exactly as you want to, when you actually come to that situation for real, your brain will think you've already done it and it will know what to do.
Very good advice.
Quick run through, but yeah, it's all about visualizing yourself doing it successfully.
I believe that's all the questions I had for you, Claire.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you have anything the other way, or.
Yeah, no, I haven't had anything in advance. So, but if anybody who's watching this on record would like to email us any questions that they've got, then please do feel free to do that. That's not a problem at all. And then I guess all that remains is for us to tell people what's happening next time. So our next session will be on Thursday, the 15th of September, I believe. And we're going to be talking about getting divorce ready. So if you're in those early stages and you're wondering about how to get prepared, what you need to do, what the process looks like, this session will answer all of your questions. So 15th of September, 1 o'clock, we'll be back after our little summer break. So, and I think it's going to be Lauren next time. Yeah, and then Lev will be joining us again in October. So just all that remains really is to thank everybody for coming. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you found it useful. And I will be sending the video out to everybody who booked on so that you can watch it again in your own time. So I shall stop record and thank you, Lev.